Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Doyle, Operations Director of CTAM Europe. I'm here to welcome you to today's virtual discussion, which is a roundup of some of the topics discussed at IBC recently. I'll leave the full introductions to our moderator and CTAM Europe board member, Frazier, although I'm sure you probably know this trio already from past webinars and industry events. We're scheduled today for 45 minutes, which includes time for questions, which Marco will read at the end. So we invite you to post your questions via the Q&A button. As always, the recording of this presentation will be posted onto the members only section of ctameurope.com. If you're not a current member, please email info@ctameurope.com for more details. Members have access to an industry webinar a month and webinars and podcasts from our colleagues across the pond at CTAM US. We always have an annual event, which is due to happen in January, hopefully in London. Members are also invited to apply for the week-long executive management program at INSEAD. Our class of 24 will be at INSEAD next March, and I'll follow up with details by email in the next couple of days. Our panelists have access to the registration list and they may follow up with their own news separately. So enough from me. Let's get to this main event. Marco, I'm passing it over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Appreciate the introduction. As mentioned, I'm Marco Frazier, longtime board member of CTAM Europe and currently managing partner of Screen Plus, a media consultancy based in New York City. Thanks to all of you for joining us for today's CTAM Europe webinar. If you're a regular of our CTAM Europe webinars, welcome back. If this is your first one, we hope you find this interesting enough to join us for more. Today, we're going to explore and recap some of the main trends and topics that dominated this year's IBC conference in Amsterdam. We'll be moderating a discussion between two media industry luminaries, who, as Karen mentioned, you probably already know, and always seem to be on the forefront of what is happening in our ever-changing and quickly evolving industry. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to two panelists, Marion Ranchet, founder of The Local Act, consultancy based in Amsterdam. Marion empowers streaming video services to launch and grow SVOD, AVOD, and FAST channels. She also works with platforms and tech vendors and has an extensive background in content, expertise, and distribution. And you may have run across Marion's industry newsletter called Streaming Made Easy. We also have Maria Ingold, founder and CEO of My Reality, specializing in media, AI strategy, innovation, and advisory. Normally based in London, Marie brings years of experience as CTO that successfully deployed leading-edge visual technology across media and entertainment. Marie has delivered some of the most successful on-demand movie services in Europe, including the joint venture between Disney and Sony, Filmflex Movies. So, ladies, we're honored to have you both here with us today and to kick off this discussion. Attendance at IBC seemed to be up this year and good numbers, and that's a positive thing for all of us for the industry. And there were certainly a couple of themes that seemed to dominate the discussions and agendas. Two of these are transformative technology, including AI and ML, and the other is shifting business models, which includes fast, smart TVs, emerging in-car entertainment segment, and others. So it seems that new technology is yet once again disrupting our media and entertainment industries. As an example, just look at the recent writer strike, which just resolved on September 27th, and the important role that AI had in that strike. So with that, Maria, would you like to kick off and tell us about some of your main takeaways from IBC this year as regards to transformative technology? There are a lot of terms being used, and maybe you could help us better understand some of them.
Yeah, so I'm going to dive into a lot of this in detail later, so I don't want to go into a lot of detail yet, but I think it's really helpful to sort of give you a foundation about what are the different terms people are throwing around and what they really mean by them. So because everyone's adding AI as a term into what they're doing, and to try to, as one of the speakers said, to try to pitch to them. And we need to differentiate between it being a gimmick and it being useful. So artificial intelligence as a term is a bucket term. It's everything that human intelligence goes into. So that's natural language processing, it's computer vision, it's robotics, it's machine learning, it's generative AI, and artificial general intelligence. What we really mean what we've meant for the past few years when we talk about AI is machine learning. And that's about finding patterns in the data without having specifically programmed it. So that's mostly around predicting, sometimes around classifying, and it's used in churn prediction, targeted advertising, recommendations engines. So everything we've been doing so far. And what's new though is generative AI. Sorry, my dad's watching TV. He's here. He's a rocket scientist, but you know. The subfield of it is, it's a subfield, generative AI is a subfield of machine learning. Its goal is to create new content. And it's the bucket, again, it's a bucket term for things like transformers, which enable foundation models, which enable large language models like ChatGPT. And then we've got diffusion models, which are things like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion. And then we only really briefly talked about artificial general intelligence at the conference because currently it's still hypothetical. So what we're doing is moving from that predictive to the generating to general. And we're expanding from a narrow artificial intelligence to a broad one.
Got it. There seems to be a lot of uncertainty about where this is heading. Maria, do you think we should be afraid of AI?
No, I don't think. I mean, AI has been around since 1965, okay? But it's important to understand that even though we hit a hype cycle for ChatGPT in May, or hit sort of the peak of the hype cycle, it isn't a hype cycle, right? We are definitely at an inflection point. Things are definitely changing. And I heard a few things around the show talking about AI. One is Dex from Google noted that the pace and innovation is going to exceed expectations. And I agree with that. And he also noted that innovation, everything's connected, and we have to be really responsible about how we use AI. So Renard, who's the president of SMPTE, noted that it's like a toddler. It needs context, reinforcement, and teaching. And also he just points out that it's just math, folks. But my favorite definition of AI at the conference was it's like an affectionate, obedient hamster with a gambling problem. And that was Lewis Smithingham from Media Monks on the panel that I was on as well. So that was hilarious. But it's important to remember that, yeah, it's a great definition, right? But it's important to remember that AI is Industry 4.0 is about automation, whereas when we're moving now to is something that's more about augmentation. This is where it's important that we're subject matter experts, because we use that subject matter expertise to combine with AI. AI takes away the mendacity, and we're bringing our ingenuity to it. So, like with the writer's strike that's just happened, AI is under where they were saying that AI is under control of the writers now, right? And not under control of the studios. And that's the benefit to them because it should be used as an automation technology and it's complementary to humans. And I think that's a really key point. So, you know, a little human in the loop is going a long way here. There's a few other things to consider. I mean, it does have a lack of empathy, but we're starting to become more intimately involved with our AI. But the real dividing point here is that there are people who use it and people who don't. And I think that's going to be the real key dividing point for the future.
Sure. Marion, what about you? Do you think we should be afraid of AI?
I don't know. I think I'm puzzled, right? So I love new technology, innovation, and you know, I think it's about time there's something, you know, really truly new happening. But you know, I think much like what Maria said, I don't want to be in a world where, you know, we have no take in whatever is coming out, whatever is being produced, etc. Especially in the media and entertainment industry, I think the creativity and what we can bring to the table is so great. That's where, you know, I'd be worried. Having said that, I think, you know, the best way to overcome that is to, you know, find a way to make use of it. So I haven't had the opportunity, you know, myself, but I think we need to tame it. I love so I love the reference to the hamster. I think the challenge that we're having now is that there's that, obesity in terms of information, right? So like Maria was saying, a lot of names are being thrown at us. I think, as a consumer, but also as a company, right? So there's always something new, something supposed to change our lives and, fasten things, etc. I think at this point in time, we need it to be streamlined. There's that education work to be done to move more people from those who are using it to, more people using it. And let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's eventually going to become
Use-
more invisible, right? And so the
Right.
using it will just be using it, right? We won't be thinking about, oh, we're using AI.
And on that point, Marion, what are companies creating with AI? And is that different from what companies may want from AI in the future?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things. There's what we have been creating with AI, right? And there's what we can start to be creating with AI. So Endava at the conference defined conventional AI versus generative AI. So what they mean is by conventional is it's normally like data science, the machine learning side of what we've been doing. So all that personalization, recommendations, targeted advertising, churn reduction, all those kinds of things. Now, conventional AI isn't going away. It's still solving problems, but we're just adding in that generative AI. And I'm starting to see different things at the conference. So what companies want, there's a lot of companies creating AI, and there's thousands that have sort of jumped on to create new technologies. But I think Z put it together fairly succinctly when they said that they're now investing, beyond just the recommendations and advertising. They're doing more, that AI and ML is really driving them to the cloud. But what they're seeing is a lot of horizontal solutions from vendors, and what they want are the vertical solutions. So this is where that subject matter expertise really comes in about solving something. It's really about understanding the problems and solving for it, rather than just going, hey, this is interesting technology. And let's just build something and hope everybody's going to come to it. So Paramount and Stan at the conference, who are Google partners, were also talking about looking for partnerships to solve generative AI, even if they're already doing ML, machine learning in-house. Paramount was noting that this fits into kind of two buckets for them. One is a creative assist and one is a productivity assist. And if you look at what McKinsey was saying recently, they're saying that productivity assist is worth about 110 million to the media and entertainment industry. And that's around things like sales and marketing and program, where sort of key areas.
That's a big number. 110
yeah,
billion.
yeah, 110 million per year, right? And so that's in that to that whole set of the industry. So there are a number of different things that are going on, and there's so much. I mean, I'm going to just whiz through a lot of things because there's so much, and it's just beyond this. But, in terms of creating, people were talking about storyboarding, pre-visualization. I'm talking too fast now. AWS was showing how that they can do slow motion by interpolating. They're showing how you can upscale to add additional value from your, SD content to HD content, and it looks really good. There's also all the content-aware infilling, so Adobe Firefly that's come out. Papercup does AI dubbing for innovation. Again, they really mentioned that the key thing here is keeping that human in the loop, and that actually it's not about replacing, it's about augmenting. And that was a really core theme through the whole conference, is everyone is took pains to sort of explain that really clearly. There's a lot that I'm seeing around summarizing so that you can summarize news. I thought one of the interesting things was you can use AI to see how messaging from politicians changes over time. We were talking about using it as a co-pilot for coding and writing. And then we started getting, a lot of people were talking around hyper-personalization. So that could be things like voice cloning, and you can personalize a video with lip sync to say, hello, Dave, or hello, Marion, or, or hello, Mario. And you can use that to create custom content. It's also possible to use it to localize into different languages. But I was just looking on Instagram last night, and Jamie Lee Curtis was posting something about that. And a lot of people were saying, and in relation to the actors' strike, and a lot of people were saying, okay, I'm a native speaker. It's not quite there yet. But this is, these are things that are possible. And we're going to have to look at how we manage that going forward. There's a lot of hyper-personalization stuff being discussed. So you could remove blood if you don't like it from a horror film. You can make content safe to view for families. There's a lot of auto everything, transcription, translation, tagging. And then there's another area that Ndava was talking about, which is semantic segmentation, where you can have a scene, you can look at the objects in a scene and then buy something. So this is the whole shopification side. So there's so many different parts that are possible here.
Okay. It sounds like a lot of interesting developments, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about hyper-personalization. But for a minute, I'd like to turn our attention to the changes in the way that content is being distributed, consumed, and monetized. Marion, what are some of your key takeaways that you think are worth highlighting from what you saw on that side?
So I started a conference with Evan Shapiro's keynotes, and you potentially know Evan. You know how he likes to ruffle feathers, to put it politely. And so I was in a room, and he was essentially telling the audience that our industry was full of white men and old, and that we were dinosaurs, and that we needed to change and adapt, etc., etc. Big silence, because I think everyone agrees, right? But the question is, what can we do to move along and have that transformation going on? So there's a few things that I've seen during the event where I thought I was hopeful that we were able to transform and be where we need to be with those new audiences. Fast is one for sure. So this year it wasn't a question of who was offering fast, who had technology to augment fast, to personalize fast. So I actually don't know the amount of AI, true AI there's behind that, but there's a lot of personalization going on, and it does similar things to what Maria said, the goal being that it's a time saver in terms of channel creation, or you can even have a bespoke channel for Maria, Marco, and Marion, based on how we've behaved on a given service. So a lot of cool stuff, but so it's the buzzwords, everyone's in on it. When you look from the outside, meaning that you're not a vendor and you're not pitching a solution and you're trying to make sense of this, I kind of wondered, right? It's very difficult. You feel like everyone is offering the same thing. It's very difficult to understand if it's the right solution. It's difficult to understand if it's solving, a problem, right? Or it's just, again, putting a solution on a problem that doesn't exist. So if I were, going as a content provider to this event, looking at, where should I go? Where should I look? I don't think I would have had an answer, right? So I think that's the number one thing. Is it's great to get into this new business, but you need to make it clear exactly what you offer and what are the pain points that you're, actually solving. Now, some cool stuff. So I've seen a couple of demos on, personalized fast channels, one from Speedio. These guys are actually doing exactly that right mix of ML plus human curation, semantics to power content recommendation. And so they're putting that to use to fast. And it was pretty solid. So I'm interested to see that actually going live on a given platform and see how users respond to it, right? Because personalization is great, but if it's not done well, you can end up in this, echo chamber that you can't get out of, right? So we'll see about that. The other thing that was, you couldn't miss it. There was Mercedes, on the show floor, on the TiVo stand, that specific model wasn't even released to the public. I think it's going to be released in November. And so you had in-car entertainment. And I think that for the first time, I really saw, one, the use case, and two, a pretty great implementation, real life implementation. So I sat down, not behind, the wheel, because someone was doing the demo. So I was, on the other side, but the screen was curved. The UX UI was really meant to be, from a smaller screen. Of course, it was switching off when you were driving, because the idea was really a use case for the driver and not necessarily a use case, for the kids, which is what we've heard in the past, right? Except that kids have tablets. So what's the point? Here, it's really the use case the team was putting forward at TiVo was really, you're waiting, in your car. I do that over the weekend when I'm waiting for my sons to finish his game. And instead of watching something on your phone, you can actually have access to the news. And, they had SVOD, you had a couple of fast channels, etc. It was pretty convincing, and the quality was there. So I don't know if it was 4G or 5G powered, but I thought that was an interesting one. And I think it brings a lot of opportunities for content providers in that space.
Marion, you packed a lot of information in that, covered a lot of topics. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions just to clarify on some things? So sort of in the order you presented them, you touched on bespoke fast channels. I think it might be worthwhile for our audience to explain a little bit more about what that is in an environment where the number of fast channels have been mushrooming. I don't know if you know the approximate number that there are. And what is the value of a bespoke fast channel in a world where there are so many fast channels? So that's one part, and then I'd like to come back to the in-car entertainment after you.
Yeah, sure thing. I was on a roll. So fast free advertising supporting streaming TV. So essentially, TV in the age of streaming in the US, there's above 1,700 channels. In Europe, we're trending more between 300 to 600 depending on the market, and I'm talking unique channels, right? So depending on the platform that you're looking at, they're going to have 70, 100, 120 in Europe. Most platforms are saying that's kind of the soft cap. In the US, you're seeing 100, 200, 300, depending on the platform. So there's a lot already. So one might argue, why have personalization brought there? Well, the challenge is that because there's so many, and that there's limitation within the UI, UX of those platforms, it's difficult to find what you want to watch, right? So you come back to the same paradox of choice that we've had with SVOD, right? Where we're spending 15 to 20 minutes, every night looking for something to watch. So FAST was supposed to fix that, right? So someone is coming, they've chosen the programming for the next 2 hours for you. If you're in, fine, you start. If you're not, you flick through and you go to another channel. The challenge is that there's so many, people are not going to scroll down. So where personalization makes sense is that based on how someone is behaving on the platform, you could actually bring up what they watch the most, or make suggestion based on how they behaved on the platform. But you could also actually build channels that are fully catered to you. And so the demo I saw, the few demos I've seen, were really about saying, if Marco is a big fan of traveling shows, then instead of having a fast channel that caters to travel globally, we understand that Marco may have Italian roots or whatever, and so we'll do an Italian travel fast channel for Marco. And the way it's done in the background is that it's pulling together, thanks to semantics and human curation, what makes the most sense for that specific channel, for that specific viewer. The interest here is that it's creating, small segments of audiences, but that means that when you layer advertising on top, you can have brands that have a lot of affinity with Marco and what he likes to watch. And so you can then personalize the ad experience. And if you do that, the risk of someone, not watching the ad is limited, right? So it increases the completion rates and all of that. It's a virtual cycle, right? The more you watch, the more ads, the more revenues, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting. So it looks like we're almost evolving to point-to-point streaming rather than multicast.
Exactly. And I think, initially that was what FAST was supposed to do from an ad experience perspective, right? So versus the one-to-many ad that you see on traditional TV, you could really have a personalized experience. But why not take it further and have that personalized at the content level, as well?
Interesting. I have a question for you about the in-car entertainment. So thank you for bringing us up to speed on what you saw there. It sounds like the latest version of what's coming or what's here very shortly is that this experience is now aimed and targeted at the driver more than the passengers, obviously in a safe environment. And I think we've tended to associate some of the EVs like Tesla and some of the other new ones that are coming like Rivian and Lucid as cutting edge with the displays. But what you described in the Mercedes, and that was a partnership with TiVo, did you say?
Yeah.
Sounds quite interesting. So it seems like a step above what we've seen before.
Yeah, I think what's interesting here is that it's the partnership angle, and I think Maria mentioned it with AI as well, is that you can't be great at everything you do, right? And so TiVo, Xperi, they do great video experiences. And then Mercedes, they do great cars, right? And so you're bringing the two together. So that's the first example. There's going to be different use cases, different implementation. Let's see how that works, right? I think we may need to have more use cases than just the one of waiting time, although I'm sure they have a bit of data saying that we end up spending XYZ time waiting in traffic, etc. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. And what was interesting as well here was I looked at it from the TiVo angle. So TiVo Xperi, historically they were making DVRs and then devices. The switch, the shift they're making is that they're becoming an OS, right? So they're going to launch in Europe across different markets, much like an Android or a Roku OS. And so what was interesting was straight away they had TVs in mind, but also cars. And I think they will tweak the experience from one device to the other. It's not the same size, the time you have is more limited. So maybe short form, things like that will be, but essentially they were really trying to build an ecosystem and making sure that you had, a consistent experience across devices. So I thought that was pretty powerful. So I'm eager to see, additional folks entering that space.
Definitely. So it seems like we have an interesting turf battle going on the OS for TVs. I think, in part the growth of fast channels in the US has been aided by the rapid adoption of smart TVs that particularly exploded during the pandemic. Is what we're seeing a transition of gatekeepers from pay TV platforms to OEMs and software? Could both of you comment on that? Maybe Marion, you can start with that, and Maria, you can follow up.
Yeah, very much so. Although I would say that the dynamics are quite different from one region to the other. So I'm French, based out of Amsterdam, and I've worked for a telecom operator, and I've worked for Roku in the US. So I've seen the two sides of the equation, and that cord cutting effect that has taken the US by storm, and we're seeing cable and MVPDs, bleeding subs. We're not exactly seeing the same trend here. There's a similar trend, but it's going slower. And so I think, in Europe, telecom operators, pay TV providers still have a comfortable, seat at the table. Whereas, it's in the US, I think clearly you can't launch in the US if you're not on, a Roku device or a Fire TV device, right? Whereas if you go in France, you want to be with the telcos, the Orange, the SFR of the world. Same in the UK, you want to be on Sky. So it's different power play depending on the region, but clearly you have more folks trying to, be your entertainment hub, essentially.
Maria?
And I've been looking at things more on the technical side. So in terms of what we're doing around FAST and what we're doing around smart TVs. So when you were talking about things like being bespoke, one of the considerations is if you're creating bespoke channels and it's getting to be really that one-to-one communication, and it's very niche content, you might want to just do things like just-in-time encoding, like what the Cortex product does. And if you're also doing all of the FAST and people aren't logging in, then you still can use AI to give you those insights into the behavior patterns to target that advertising. You also mentioned things around the Sky Glass product. So where I'm seeing the technical shifts here are that we're starting to do much more around voice recognition. So of course we've already had that with Alexa on the Amazon, Fire Stick, but that's recently been added to Sky Glass. And at the conference, Season was talking about their Whale OS 4 product, which again also now includes that as part of the operating system. And the other piece that we're starting to see is more around Web3, which isn't just restricted to smart TVs, but it is enabling profit sharing, because you can say, this is the content that I've created that I own, and then making sure that you're getting that money back when it's being viewed on various services. And also there's other companies like Greenfish, which are adding in the technology behind to make sure that it's easier to create that content once and then distribute it from one core location while maintaining that ownership path so that you can guarantee the monetization to the content creators. So that's the side that I'm looking at it from.
Yeah, and clearly there's a need, right? Because this is a very fragmented ecosystem. You're looking at one streaming service, and let's talk about maybe going to one or two big markets. There's over 15 different technical ecosystem they have to integrate into. So the amount of work and the amount of money you need upfront to get started and have an app across that fragmented ecosystem. So those running, on Linux, those being HTML5, Roku as its own, proprietary language that is BrightScript, etc. All of those things are becoming obstacles for small and medium streamers, and even for the big guys, it's a lot of work. We've seen all the big guys launching outside of the US, and they're slowly rolling out partnership. Because again, they have to do bespoke work to make sure that this thing they've built works everywhere. So I love the idea of having technology making their lives easier, because ultimately you need eyeballs, and so you need to try to be on as many platforms as possible.
Yeah, and I've certainly noticed, that some people like my dad really benefit from being able to talk to, watching something rather than trying to type things into search. And, there's definitely a shift. And then that then generates a lot more people who are interested and able to watch the content.
Yeah, I think you're right to point out, the focus has been placed on voice recognition. There's a lot of investment in that, and it ties across everything, especially in-car entertainment as well, too. That's sort of the key for it. Sorry, Marion, what were you saying?
No, on voice, it was meant to be, of course, this thing that was supposed to fix discoverability, for us users. I'm still, I'm still wondering, and I don't know exactly. I've seen, data here and there on how do we actually access, and it feels like it's still quite a low percentage. Is it because we need to educate consumers as to the fact that they can use the remotes to actually search for content? Or is it because they've used it and it's not good enough? And then that speaks to a bit of voice, but also the fact that, universal search needs to be worked on. I think, there's still a lot of things to create that shortcuts.
I think it's gonna get interesting when the generative AI piece comes in more, and then you're actually able to have that natural language interface. Because right now, when you ask it to do things, it feels like it's a very narrow language set. So I think that combining that we'll start seeing more interesting things around discoverability. But yeah, I mean, I grew up with Star Trek, so I keep hoping that that's how the world's going to look in the future.
Maria, did
I'm
you
sure
see
we'll get there.
Tubi? They launched last week, I think, a Chat GPT, empowered module within their app. It's called Rabbit Hole. Did you see that?
Who is this?
Tubi. I think
No, I
you're
haven't.
in the US right now, so you should check it out and you should tell us whether it makes sense or not. But it's a streaming service. Free streaming, not SVOD, and they have like 60,000 titles. So, talk about discoverability potentially being a problem. And so there's this small module that's supposed to be powered by ChatGPT that helps you choose what you're going to watch next. And they did a small video, and the example was, if you want to watch a movie with sharks eating carrots, something kind of silly, but and then it surfaced results and supposed to facilitate content discovery. There's cool stuff like that, so that's why you're right. Be scared of it.
Yeah, and I'm working with a startup who uses emojis, so you can say, "Hey, I'm feeling hungover," and give it or "I'm feeling X" with an emoji, and it'll give you things to make you feel the way you want to feel rather than just necessarily feeling hungover. So there's all sorts of interesting interfaces and things coming out of AI now.
Movies about maybe stop drinking, something.
On that point, I'm curious, especially if what we're dealing with. I love that definition of a hamster with a gambling problem. And I guess this is more a question for you, possibly, Maria. Do you think that there are ethical considerations or bias considerations that are being addressed and need to be addressed? What does the landscape look like from that perspective?
Yeah, so there was a lot of discussion on that at the conference, and Adobe was actually heading out quite a lot of those discussions, because they've recently come out with Firefly, and what they really needed to do was make sure that all of that training, so this is the ethically sourced content part, all of that training was done on artist opted in Adobe stock, as well as public domain and open source. And this is necessary for commercial safety. So if you're trying to create content, you don't want to, and it's been trained on images, you don't want something to be in there that hasn't been approved for use, right? So if you're creating something yourself, one of the key points that they were raising is that ethics is going to conflict with the P&L. So, but it's a false assumption that ethics is just a nice to have. So essentially, if you're not being ethical about the content that you're sourcing and that you're creating, or if there's a bias in the set that you're using to train it with, then you might lose consumer trust. And so it's really key to consider that. And in fact, Adobe has an ethics committee that they're using. So what they said is that your KPIs really need to be both financial and user-centric. So really think through it from that perspective. And that also means that you need things like transparency. So in some cases, like healthcare, you really need full interpretability. You need to know how the AI actually reached that conclusion. But regardless, and that depends on the different algorithms that you use, but you really do need some form of transparency in how you're getting your content. And part of that is around the bias. So all of us inherently have bias just by the world that we grew up in. So the way to mitigate that is to essentially have enough representation of the diversity of thought in order to make sure that you're reflecting enough types of thought to sort of eliminate, or at least reduce as much as possible that bias. And then the other pieces that come out of that around sort of that ethical pieces, well, is this content actually authentic? So, as we start running into more election seasons, this is going to get interesting to see how many deepfakes of content are out there. So we really need to be able to prove, where did this content come from? Is it real? Is it authentic? And there's a couple of different things happening there. Google has a synth ID, which watermarks, for instance, and identifies AI generated content. And then there's also coalitions being set up, like the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. On a sort of further pieces, we're still trying to regulate this industry. So the way that it's regulated varies completely by territory. So the EU probably has the most in-depth. It's very much a people-focused way of looking at things and sort of identifying various levels of risk. The UK is very much innovation-focused, similarly to the sort of, in a way, to the US, which is more about self-regulating. China is very state-focused. The problem is there's no global standard right now. So if you create something, there you have to look at, how do I release it in this territory and how do I release it in this one? And then the other two things that we're really having to touch on are sustainability, because computing uses up a lot of energy, and we're going to have to think through, how do we do this more efficiently and effectively in order to remain sustainable. And then there's a concern around empathy. So because even though I love talking to Claude, I'm like, wow, this is really great. It's really positive, but it's not, it isn't real. It's not, it doesn't have any empathy from what I'm doing. It may sort of go, that was a really great insight you had. But what that might do, and I heard this at the CogX conference, is that people are starting to develop intimate bonds. And I don't mean that in any sort of sexual way. I just mean that in sort of a way that's, they start caring for, the different AIs. So, or the different generative AIs. So I was using ChatGPT, and then I started using Claude, and I feel like I'm cheating on ChatGPT a little bit. Sure. Right. And that's that intimacy. It's really strange.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know that people are thinking about these important issues. We're getting very close to the end of our time, but I have to say it is reassuring to know that that discussion is taking place. In some ways, it sounds reminiscent of the discussion of some of the practices of Meta. So it's not necessarily the first time we're confronting this. Hopefully, there's other things we can look at. But with that, we've had a couple of questions come through, and I want to make sure that there's time to answer those. But Marion, I'll give you a chance to respond to that quickly before we move to the questions.
So what do we have? Tubi, TUBI, American company.
Oh yeah, Tubi.
Yeah, that's the accent that doesn't do it. When I say Claude, that works better. And then I have a question from Juan Fuentes, who I know, at least on the LinkedIn universe. How do you think major sports organization could tap into FAST with offerings that could complement their TV rights but not compromise their live matching offering? What are the most efficient strategies that you think can be? So what I like about FAST, the sports organization, the best example is DAZN, right? So DAZN is spending a lot of money on very premium rights. It's a fairly cheap. It's in between 10 and 30, I think, depending on markets. SVOD offering with great content. Why I think it's great for them to get into fast is that it's putting the brand out there. It's, helping them go get, casual viewers who don't necessarily want to spend another 30 euros with them because they're spending already money with the Sky, Canal Plus, or, you name it. What I love about what they've done as well is that they can editorialize in a way. So they've done, a channel dedicated to combat, but they've done one called Rise that it's dedicated to women's sports. So as often, I think fast, because it's fairly easy to start. It's a great way to, innovate and do, again, bespoke channels, digital channels that maybe you wouldn't do if you had to go through the entire, broadcast hurdles. In terms of, live versus on demand, I think we need some live in fast, but fast to work, right? Because otherwise it's just going to be, even if original programming can be great, what people love most is live content. So I think you need to put a bit of live content in there. And I know that DAZN, what they do is that in Germany, they put a bit of Ligue 1, I think they do La Liga, Serie A, in Germany. So no, they're not going to put Bundesliga, which is the most viewed one, right? It's their USP for German consumers. But, those football fans that can never get enough, why not, offering a bit more on top without, jeopardizing your business. And there's companies, so I work with a company on the tennis vertical, and these guys, they put a lot of, live content out, and it's not cannibalizing anything. They're trying to go international. So La Liga, I'm assuming you're very strong in Spain, in LATAM, but there's surely markets where, you're not, and maybe you don't sell the rights the way you want to. Then I think fast is a great opportunity for you.
Excellent. Those are all good points. We are pretty much at time now. There were a couple more questions. I might try and sneak one more minute out of it. The question was, what was the best demo that you saw at IBC? Is there a way to quickly mention that from each of you?
Maria, did you see something specific, or is it still early days? I think you saw cool stuff at Amazon, right?
Yeah, so I didn't see. I was there a day and a half, and so I didn't see a lot. I was mostly in the conference sessions. So yeah, I mean, the stuff at Amazon was interesting, because it allowed you to do the interpolation and to do slow motion, and then also the upscaling, which was good. I still kind of fond of the news demo that I saw, where you can sort of go back and look at sort of the politicians and see how their messaging has changed over time. I thought that's a really sort of interesting insight that I hadn't considered. But there's so many different things there and we're touching on so many different parts of the technology and what's possible.
Okay. All right. We are at time now. So I want to thank you both, Marion and Maria, for joining us today on this CTAM Europe webinar. There's enough interesting topics here that I'm sure we could go on for a long time. But it's encouraging to know that we're talking about not replacing people, but sort of augmenting the experience, and that a little bit of human in the loop goes a long way. So I look forward to following your newsletters and your work on these subjects as things continue to evolve. Back to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Marco. And on the topic of newsletters, I'll be sending everybody, Marion has a newsletter, and Maria, I will send over her LinkedIn profile as well, because you do a lot of your live sessions.
I live post all of the events I get attended to. So any seminars that I see, I'll summarize it live so that you can experience the conference even if you're not there. Excellent.
And I did like as well, Maria, how you said that people have have an intimate not a relationship,
Mm.
intimate.
It is almost a
kind of,
relationship
yeah.
that people build, right?
Because
You know, there's a
have
connection.
I have it with my robot Hoover as well, called Elsie, and I bought a new one, and it's just not the same, and it is going back to Amazon. I bought one for upstairs, one for downstairs, and Elsie is named after my grandma, but the other one is going back. I just do not like it at all. So I'm glad it's not just me in the world.
It's not just you.
That's good. That is very good. So thank you very much, Marco.
Thank you, guys.
Moderation yet again. And if anybody does have any further questions, email them over to info@ctameurope.com and I'll forward on to everybody.
Yeah, and come to IBC 2024, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And if not, you just need to do this roundup again now every year. And
yeah, okay. I mean,
excellent.
sounds good.
Excellent.
Definitely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Take
See
care.
you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.